Welcome to the Leader's Edge, where we celebrate leadership and shine a light on the visionary leaders shaping our future. Hey, I'm HR Huntsman, founder of Leader's Edge, creator of the Leader's Edge Performance Engine and Leader's Edge University. I am thrilled to bring you stories from leaders who are making a difference around the world. In each episode, we champion the innovative strategies, courageous decisions, and inspiring journeys of those who lead with purpose and passion. So, whether you're looking to refine your leadership skills or you simply want to be inspired, my friend, you are in the right place. Today's guest is a powerful force redefining the future of work. Kamber Parker Bowden is an award-winning speaker, author, and she's the founder of GPS Generational Performance Solutions, formerly known as the Yo Pro No. What started as a blog born out of her curiosity and a creative spark at 21 has evolved into a national movement grounded in over 10,000 interviews and 50,000 hours of content across more than 65 industries. Her company now helps forward-thinking organizations crack the code on generational performance, intergenerational communication, and workforce alignment, equipping them to hire, engage, and retain with confidence. From her roots as a 14-year-old soccer referee to presenting at Fortune 100 companies like Ford, Kamber has consistently stepped into bold leadership, building GPS from scratch, scaling her team, and staying grounded in the values that her family instilled in her, which are hard work, service, and learning from those who came before. So, get ready to be inspired by the woman behind the talent impact process and her bold goal to impact 100,000 companies. Kamber Parker Bowden is here, and her story is one worth listening to. Let's dive in. Good morning, my friend. Welcome. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, I want to jump right into this. Your favorite opening when you begin with a client or an interview is my favorite opening as well. That I begin every conversation I have with a potential new client or someone on the podcast. Kamber, tell me your story.
Yeah, it sounds great minds think alike. So kudos to you for having that same thought. My story, I think, is really one of curiosity. I started my career working at a Fortune 500 insurance company in Tennessee. I was 21 years old. I got there thinking this is going to be where I spend my entire career. My dad worked for Nationwide for 30 years, so we were an insurance family, so to speak. And I had a rude awakening when I got there, right? It was the thought of I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. And after 10 months, I was really disillusioned and I left the company feeling like I had failed. In that time, I started talking to a lot of my peers who were just out of college, and everybody seemed to be leaving their first, their second, their third jobs all within 6 to 12 months. And I had to wonder, like, why is this happening? And I'm a millennial, and this was pre-pandemic, so the millennial job hopping craze was pretty, you probably saw it in the news everywhere you turned, and it was pretty prevalent. And so I decided at that point, I had this itch, like, why is this happening? This is not something that you really are told in school that this is going to happen. And so I started a blog, and the blog just was interviewing young professionals from across the country, and one thing led to another. And 8 years later, here we are, a full-fledged workshop training firm that helps organizations navigate generational dynamics. And it all started from my first career and an organic blog. And so there's a lot more we could probably dive in, but I'll pause there just to share that I asked a lot of questions. That's how I think I've gotten here today, but it really stemmed from just really being interested in learning from others.
So I'm curious about kind of the DNA inside of you. And I read about your parents and grandparents a little bit, and some of that's been passed down to you. I can't wait to hear about that. But what is it inside of you that was taught to you, or maybe it's just your curiosity that said, I want to know more about this rather than just I'll find another job and I'll move on my career and I'll find a better place for me? What about you said, wait, I got to figure this out?
I think part of it, there's probably twofold. So one, I did have to switch. I had to get another job, right?
Sure.
Because one, 22 years old, could not live on a blog at the time. So I switched careers. I went from a 10,000 person insurance company to a two-person at the time nonprofit back in Greenville, South Carolina, which is now where I live, but also where I went to college. And that was where I built up my business. So I had a lot of flexibility in that job, which was wonderful. So just a little side note, did jump jobs, but what prompted me to start this was really twofold. The first, and you mentioned my grandparents and my parents. I was fortunate as a child to get thrown into situations with people 50, 60 years older than me. My parents made sure of it. We come from a really large family on both sides. And I was dropped off at my grandparents from a really young age, and we heard their stories. We listened, we asked questions, and I really believe that stems into some of the work that we do today.
Yeah.
The other piece of this was I was probably a little stubborn, a little prideful. Like, I really thought that I would be at this first job my entire career. I thought I would climb the corporate ladder, as I shared earlier. And when I realized that was not going to happen, I didn't tell a lot of people that I left the company because, again, I felt like this was such a failure. And because of that pride, I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. Like, other people are telling me the same
Uh,
things are happening. So that was really the start. And I remember the first interview that I had with a young professional so vividly. And after the interview, it was somebody that I really looked up to. I met him in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I lived. And at the end of the interview that I had somehow thought to record, he was like, "So what are you going to do with this?" It's fine that he was really cool about it, but he said, "What are you going to do with this?" And I was like, stay tuned. I feel like this can really be something. And the other cool thing was I asked every person that I interviewed for the blog to connect me to the next person.
yeah.
We started just having this web of people, and they were all saying the same thing. So I think it started from a place of pride and maybe a little stubbornness, but then once I realized that others were having the exact same experiences as me, I thought there was something to do about it. And that's how the
Okay.
monetization of the business kind of started, because we realized there was a solution.
I can't wait to hear what you've learned. I work with companies around the country, lots of Gen X leaders. I'm Gen X. My kids are millennials, and I hear all the time, stinking millennials, Gen Z, no one wants to work anymore. You've probably heard it
Yeah.
a million times. What do we need to know? What can you teach us? And what's the rub? What's the disconnect?
Yeah, so there are several disconnects, but the crux of all of it is we all really want the same things, right? If we look at every generation in the workplace today, Gen Z, the youngest, millennials, Gen X, and baby boomers, there's still some baby boomers in the workforce. We all want a few things, right? We want to support ourselves,
Sure,
okay?
sure.
We want to, whether it's maybe supporting ourselves, it might be our children, our families, or even our pets, right? If we don't have kids, we all want to feel like some meaning in our work. Maybe it's a range, but most of us want those things. We just have different definitions of what that looks like and how to get there. And so that's the crux of the disconnect. And then how that shows up is how we communicate with each other. And for several years, it was about 3 years that I just posted this blog. It was very organic. I was working in a nonprofit, building up the business. And for several years, that was all it was, until I realized I had hundreds of great interviews that were all telling me the same thing. And that's when I was able to offer some solutions and some data to companies. At the time, we were solely focused on helping organizations understand young professionals, right? 21 to 39-year-olds. But then we quickly realized that wasn't covering the entire workforce. It was just focusing on one sector. And that's when we really opened up our messaging to, here's how we can help you navigate all of the generational dynamics in the workplace. And so to answer back to your question, what is the disconnect and how can you learn from us at Generational Performance Solutions? I think the key is what understanding first and then telling, right? So, how can you learn from others and then share your own preferences? I think that's the biggest piece. And so, generational data can help leaders make really smart decisions about how they attract talent, retain talent, communicate and engage their talent. But there has to be a mindset shift first. It can't always be, this is how we did it back in our day, so they need to do that too. And on the flip side, the young professionals can't just say, we're entitled, we know best. There needs to be this balance, and that's really where we come in.
Okay. Let's get really practical here. So let's pretend I'm dealing with a Gen X CEO and he comes to me, we're working with this company, and he says, these kids, they're so frustrating. I'm going to use your word entitled. They just want raises, they want bonuses. It's all me taking. They don't want to grind. They don't want to work hard. Like they want the outcome before the input. What do you say to that leader?
Yeah. So the really practical steps are ask them first, do you know how they're communicated? Like what's their preference for being communicated with and how are they motivated? If
Okay.
you don't know those two simple things, and that can be easily asked in the recruiting process, in the interviews, it can be asked on day one in the onboarding, and then it should be brought up ongoing. If you don't know those answers, that is your problem right there. Okay. Because what we find is with leaders and with young professionals, maybe they're individual contributors, when they're so focused on them, right, and how they communicate and not how others communicate, they're missing a lot. There's a lot. That's how gray area is created in multi-generational communication. So once you learn that about your team and then you're strategic about how you use that information, you will start to see performance increase.
So then what are the best Gen X and boomer, maybe older millennials? What are the best leaders? What are some of the habits you see them doing that allows them to cross performance across generations is really high, retention is high, employee satisfaction is high. What are those leaders doing at a practical leadership level?
Yeah, so I'll put a little plug in here for my book because the concept is called The Generational Advantage. The book title is The Generational
Perfect.
Advantage. And it's a mindset, it's a leadership mindset that we've coined where, so it directly answers your question. It's a leadership mindset that does a few things. One, it looks at generations as strengths, not obstacles, right? You're
Good.
not looking at them saying they're so entitled, which is doing what? You're focusing on one thing, but you're not focusing on performance, engagement, connection, communication, all which drives profitability and performance. So that's one piece of this. The other piece of this is generational curiosity and really allowing multiple voices from all age groups, all demographics to share feedback, to have a seat at the table. And that is what the generational advantage is. So we have found that companies who embrace that mentality and that mindset, they're going to see much more success. We're really focused on the future, right? So not just how do you navigate current generational dynamics, but looking ahead at Gen Alpha, who will be in the workforce before we know it as interns, as co-op programs, and even as clients for some organizations. So when you are not prepared for the future, that's also going to hurt. So these leaders having this mindset, it's not just the right now mindset, it's being very future oriented and asking, how do we prepare for the people who are coming into our pipeline as
So
well?
good. I wrote down a note to myself. I think curiosity is the key to so much anyway. So I wrote down generational curiosity. I like that a lot.
Mhm.
I have lots of millennial and now Gen Z clients that we work with. And here's what I see in your generation and the generations coming behind you that I think you're stronger at than we certainly were. And that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you crave a workplace that has deep sense of meaning and purpose. Now, I can't generalize everybody, of course, but overall, what I'm finding is millennials and Gen Zs, they want deep meaning, purpose, community connection, impact. Teach us, are you seeing that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And what I will say from we have data from more than 10,000 interviews with young and experienced professionals. So we do focus groups throughout the year. We are constantly running surveys and what we are finding is very much on point with what you said. They're looking for that deep sense of meaning. They want that fulfillment. A few years ago, we had a report that is on our website, and I think it was 2023, and most millennials said, I think it was about 62% said that meaningful work is a top driving factor for them. So they want to wake up every day feeling excited and fulfilled about their job, not having the Sunday scaries that a lot of people have, right? They're dreading going to work the next day, Sunday comes around. But the other thing that I've really just heard over and over again, not just with participants of our surveys and focus groups, but with my own peers, because I'm a millennial as well, they are taking the jobs that pay less if they have flexibility. The F word, so to speak. Flexibility is so key here. And a lot of leaders, I think, were like, in the past few years, were, oh, of course, money is important. Like, they're not going to leave for something that's paid less. And the reality is, in the recruiting side, that is the driving factor. If people are looking for a new job, oftentimes money is the number one driving factor. But the reason they leave jobs is because of that lack of flexibility, that lack of work-life balance. And so that is a really important discrepancy that we're seeing. I think people think, oh, compensation, of course, that's going to drive everybody. And I would say it's very different when we look at recruiting versus retention.
Let's go back to the meaning and purpose piece. I know how I teach it to my clients, but I want to learn from you. How do you teach the older generations to cross that purpose bridge, to communicate that, to build that in what I call destination workplaces, a term that we coined? How would you teach us to build purpose and meaning into the culture?
Yeah, so I always try to share stories because I think that helps people learn, as I'm sure. And about 2 years ago, we actually worked with a manufacturing company that manufactured fire alarms. So this is the best way I can answer your question here. This company, we went in, we did our typical generational assessment, and we surveyed their team. And they came to us, the leaders came to us saying, we are just really struggling to keep people. And by default, they were struggling to attract people. If they came in, they were leaving within a year. We went in and we realized, what are they doing at a company that makes fire alarms? What are they doing? They're saving lives, right?
Sure.
None of the communication in their recruiting, in the job descriptions, online, none of that did anything that communicated that. And so, what we recommended was a plan to insert that into all of their communication, both externally, so on their social media pages, because that is a very powerful way to attract and retain young professional talent. One of our survey or reports from a few years ago found that about 70% of young professionals will never look at will only look at a company's social media before they apply, not even their website. They're
Wow.
going to find you on social media. And we were able to give them that recommendation and we helped them implement that. And so about 18 months later, their recruiting and retention numbers skyrocketed because their messaging shifted away from we do this, we make fire alarms to we save lives.
Yeah.
That right there is showing meaning. It's showing that fulfillment and the why behind what you do. And so that's
Okay.
much easier to get behind. And so hopefully that answers your question,
It
but
does.
that is meaningful work.
I call it leaking vision everywhere. Always talk about the meaning, the purpose, the deeper why.
Yep.
That's a great story. Now, you've worked with lots of big companies, Fortune 100 companies like Ford, et cetera. What's the most surprising thing you've learned that actually shocked you? Either the most egregious misunderstanding across generations or the dumbest leadership trait that you've seen? Don't call out any names, but
Yeah.
what's the thing you've learned? Is like, man, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Oh man, that's such a good question. I probably could give you like 12 answers. I'll probably think of another one that I'll have to email you after
Okay.
today. But I think the biggest thing that I've found over the years of doing this work is it is such a social experiment that we have grown our business to the way we have, a team of five, because it shows how hungry people are for this information. So obviously, it's why we're here because of the hunger and the interest and the demand. But I think sometimes that kind of surprises me that so many companies they're inquiring about speaking every week about this topic because they're so hungry for that. And I think to me that just shows again, it's like that social experiment. We're seeing our world transform. And I
Yeah.
really started this business around 2020. That's when I took on my first clients. It had been my side hustle before that when I started the blog. But over the last 5 years, we have seen so much change in the workforce. We have seen probably the most condensed change in 5 years where we've seen the rise of AI, the rise of work-life balance
For
and
sure.
remote work and hybrid and all of the above. And so I think my answer probably encompasses a lot of different facets, but I think the most surprising thing is just how in demand this work really
Okay.
is because it just teaches me about human psychology a little bit.
That's a fact. What's the what are some of the biggest misunderstandings that generations have of each other? What stereotypes are not accurate in your experience?
Yeah. The biggest one is young professionals who think, oh, baby boomers or Gen Xers, they're not tech savvy at all. I will have a lot of Gen Xers come up to me after speaking engagements and say, wait a second, I text more than my 28-year-old coworker. On the flip side, we have a lot of senior professionals who are baby boomers or Gen Xers that will come to me and say, they meaning young professionals, they just don't have that critical thinking ability. And I think the critical thinking conversation is one that we'll continue to have over the next few years. If you've seen the news recently on how ChatGPT is stifling creative thought and creative and critical thinking, I
Sure.
think that's a whole other conversation that's not just going to impact young professionals, but the biggest one, I don't take back what I just shared with you. Those are all applicable, but the biggest one is young professionals just don't want to work hard. And they do. They absolutely do. You just have to know how to communicate with them and you have to know what motivates them. If you don't, then think of all the noise that's out there today. I used to have a slide in one of my presentations that said, "This is my story." And the slide behind me just said, blah, blah, blah. And I would say that's what your young professionals will hear if you're not clear with them. Because if you're not, it is going to go in one ear and out the other. And so I think that's reflective of how generational communication can be if you're not clear with one another.
I agree. I've seen both sides of it. I have, again, lots of clients that are millennials and Gen Z. They are killers. They're assassins. They're absolute hard workers, probably like yourself. They don't mind grinding. They roll up their sleeves, work hard, etc. I've seen, I've seen the other for sure, and I'm sure you have as well. Absolutely entitled,
Yeah.
not proactive, certainly lazy. How would you encourage us Gen Xers to pull the best out of to help maybe those that aren't critical thinking? They're not as proactive as we would like. They didn't grow up with grittiness like maybe like we did. How can we help them, or do we even need to help them be a little bit more gritty and critical thinking and proactive? What can we do to help them
Yeah.
rise?
Yeah, such a great question. The two things that come to mind. One is pretty simple and it probably will make you laugh. Be really clear about things like dress code and what time to come into work. And I say that with a little bit of hesitance, but it's so important. That is one of the number one complaints I get when leaders come to us. They're like, we cannot seem to get these Gen Zers to dress appropriately. It's like they don't know what to wear in front of a client. They are coming in at 8:30 when we say come in at 8. And the reality is, all of these Gen Zers came into the workplace post pandemic where it was very different. They didn't know what to wear because in college they were on a Zoom screen wearing sweatpants. So they need a little bit of learning. So you asked about specifically those who maybe do feel a little entitled, those who don't have the grittiness that we're looking for. You have to spell it out for them. So that's my
Okay.
first answer. The second answer is so much, I believe, of this can be some of these challenges can be remedied through the interview process. So I think recruiters and staffing agencies have such an obligation to not weed out people, but really be honest with them because that's where you go back to my 21-year-old self in the interview process. And this was pre-pandemic, but I really thought that I was going into a job that ended up being totally different. That happens so often. And the young professionals that talk to us in our interviews and focus groups, they tell us we thought we were going into a completely different job. So recruiters have such an obligation, I believe, to be as clear as possible with them, but again, give them the lay of the land. Sometimes you have to be brutally honest, and if that weeds them out, then that's fine. They weren't supposed to be there. But then they go into a job and they're a little bit more clear on what the expectations are and what what's expected of them.
Yeah.
And so those are the two things that come to mind right away. But there are ways to help some of these younger professionals along. And the last thing I'll say, just because I find a lot of Gen Xers will talk to me and say, Gen Z is just, they're such a challenge to understand. And not to make anyone more fearful, but Gen Alpha, right? I mentioned them earlier. They're coming soon. They will be interns in the next several years. And Gen Alpha will never know a world without generative AI. So if we thought that Gen Z was tough to understand,
Oh
we
man.
have another thing coming. And so I think for Gen X, and I believe Gen X is the generation to do this. I really love and respect Gen X, despite them not being talked about very often, you not being talked about very often.
Right.
I think Gen X has the ability to see Gen Alpha coming, right? And so you can be those proactive leaders by saying, what can we learn about Gen Alpha now that's going to help us understand them better when they're coming out of college or coming out of high school? And that goes back to that generational curiosity.
Yeah. I'm biased, of course. I think we're the best generation. Gen X. I grew up gritty. We were the latchkey kids. We had to take care of
Yeah.
ourselves. So we have that proactive self-determination kind of deal. And the Gen X that I know were very compassionate, very curious,
Yeah,
very, I see us personally, and again, I'm biased, but I see us a bridge generation between the
you are.
generations.
You
Yeah.
absolutely are. And one thing I'll point out, if you haven't seen it already, and I can share it with you after this, I posted something recently on my personal LinkedIn page. I saw a story from The Economist that said, like the headline was, "Why Gen X is the loser generation." And I was like, what? Like it was very clickbaity. And
Yeah.
it talked about how it's a generation that's not very talked about.
Sure.
And so I posted my response and I was like, they are most certainly not the loser generation. And here's why. And I had all of these Gen X leaders that came out of nowhere, not nowhere, I prompted them, but they were all sharing like their thoughts and their perspectives of being Gen X. And it was really powerful. So I would encourage you to take a look at that because I think
Absolutely.
it comes back to this conversation, which is how can leaders and just anyone in the workforce, how can you navigate generational dynamics? And it's having conversations like this. It is being
Yeah.
aware of all generations. And it's again, understanding that all generations have something to bring to the table. And that is how you see success in communication in your
Yeah.
workplace.
100%. I absolutely believe that clarity, you talked about clarity earlier, curiosity. If we can just be curious about each other and learn from each other, if we can go into these conversations as learners and not as
Yeah.
teachers, I think it just sets us up for success. I have
Yeah.
a lot to learn from you. My grandkids are Gen Alpha, and I want to make sure that we prepare a great place for them to have meaningful work. But I want to talk about you for a second. Let's get off the generational piece. I want to talk about you. You took a bet on yourself. You left a promising career in the insurance business. You thought you were going to be there for life, and you bet on yourself. You bet big. You took a risk. You jumped off a cliff. I want to know what that feels like and how you can inspire other young people to jump off cliffs and bet on themselves.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It feels good looking back because obviously it was worth it. This month is 3 official years since I took the business full time. It's
Wow.
been in my life for 8 years. So it's
Yeah.
been it's been my entire young professional career has
Yeah.
been this business. So it's very cool to see where it's come. But in terms of taking the leap, for me, it was, do I have enough savings to, and how long do I have savings before I can like make this work? And my now husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, he's in finance. And so he helped me budget, right? We made a plan and he was invested at that point too. But for me, it was not going to take much. I was like, I just need enough to live. So once I figured out what that amount was, I set out to get it. I was fortunate to have one or two clients before I took the business full time.
Okay.
And so for me, the practicality of it was let's make sure I can pay my bills. But the other piece of it was I leaned on a lot of mentors. I talked to a lot of people who knew me, some who didn't know me, and I was like, what does being an entrepreneur really mean? And
Yeah.
no one can really answer that for you. You have to figure that out on your own. But I am so glad I bet on myself and did it because it has been the most rewarding journey for me. I can't really see my life without this business.
Yeah.
And we actually recently rebranded. this year after 7 years of going by a different name. And it just feels really special that so many people have taken an interest in this. And I think we can go all the way. I have big hopes for the business, but it it was so worth it to take that leap. And so I think for anybody who, is listening or watching that is thinking about taking a leap, the biggest thing that you have to go into is knowing that so much of it you're going to have to learn on your own and you're going to have to be okay with that. I will never forget, it was about a year in to taking the business full time, so about 2 years ago. And I remember having this moment where I was like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur now. And it was when I was working on the business instead of in it.
Yeah.
And I was excited about the planning and the strategy and the vision. And I was like, okay, I feel like I'm an entrepreneur now. I don't know if I was the past few years. That's how I would answer that.
I love people like you that I love entrepreneurs. I started my first company when I was 28. I'm completely unemployable. I will always be, I'm a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I love building things. I love starting things. I love just rolling up my sleeves and creating. I love jumping off cliffs. What Now you've grown from a solopreneur. Now you have a big kid company now. So I'm curious about how you've had to grow as a leader, having staff and all. It's one thing to have ideas and write a blog, and it's another thing to lead an actual company.
Yes.
What's the biggest thing you've learned about leading an actual company of real team?
Oh, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it does.
If you look at like any of the personality tests out there, it's always pretty much a straight shot for me. I don't delegate well. I'm a commander, right? Like I
Okay.
share directives, like that's my personality. And I've
Okay.
had to really work on that. When I hired my first team member 3 years ago, I quickly realized that I'm a good leader. People follow my vision, but not the best manager. And so I had to put some work in there, but then I realized I can hire people that are good
Yeah,
managers.
that's
And
right.
so it's been really, I've been focused on hiring people that are better than me at a lot of things. You hear people say, I hire smarter people than me. And
Yeah.
I think something I've realized more recently, just because of where we are in the company now and our life stage, you have to spend money to make money. I think a big aha moment for me in the past 12 months has been we have to invest in ourselves if we want to get to the next
Good.
level.
So good.
And that means hiring partners like our PR firm that we now work with, or investing in publishing my own book. And that will help us get to the next level.
Yeah.
But I was not thinking that the first few years of the business.
Right.
So it's delegating, and that's been hard for me, but I think I've grown a lot in that space. And then hiring people that can do things better than me.
Is the delegation struggle for you? Does it have to do with control, perfectionism? Maybe those are the same thing. What is it for you?
Yeah, so I'm not even in my professional or my personal life, I'm not one that like necessarily needs control as much as I do want things to be perfect. And so I've
Yeah.
really worked on that.
Okay.
That like stems from just childhood. And I think that I've gotten better on certain things. I think my team would tell you, like, social media, like our own social media channels, it took a long time for me to get rid of that. And finally, my director of operations, Jade, was like, Kamber, I think it's like, can you ask yourself, is it good enough? Because somebody is not going to write it the way that you're going to write it.
Right.
And so it's learning how to separate myself and the work from me as the founder and like the person on my team who's doing a really great job. It's not that they're doing a bad job of posting and creating content, it's that it's just never going to be exactly what me, the founder, would do. And so I have to be okay with that, and not being okay with it creates a bottleneck. And
Good.
I did that for a long
Right.
time. So, yeah, that's something I continue to work on.
Who inspires you to continue to grow and move? Is it
So many people.
anyone
I
stand out?
Yeah, I have a lot of great mentors locally
Yeah.
here that I would
Okay.
say they drive me. There are some really amazing speakers out there that I follow. Jason Dorsey is one that I really appreciate. He was the top generational researcher and speaker worldwide, and it's been very cool to follow him. We are not exactly the same. He's at a different level. I aspire to be at that level very soon, hopefully one day. But there's so many differences about speakers and execution. And so that's somebody that inspires me for sure. And there's many more that I could list, but that's one that comes to mind right away.
What's next for you, Camber? You have big dreams, big goals, big vision. What's next for you? What can we expect on the horizon besides your book?
Yes, I was going to say my first book comes out this
Yay.
fall. So very excited to have that. It's been a labor of love, which has been very fun and exhausting and all the things. And we have a pretty ambitious goal by 2034. We want 100,000 companies to be utilizing our proprietary process, which is called the talent impact process. So it enhances your multi-generational workplace. And
Love,
so we have plans to scale, and I think we're on track to do that.
love it. Let's end with this, if you don't mind, if you don't mind playing along. I'd like to end with one piece of advice to give to Gen X leaders, one piece of advice to give to millennials, one piece of advice to Gen Z. And then I'd like to close with someone coming out of college like you when you were 21, 22. What advice would you give them from now your more seasoned, wise self about life, business, entrepreneurship? So if you
Yeah.
could go down that order, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can do that.
Gen
So
X.
Gen X leaders, I would tell them go and find out how your people prefer to communicate and how they're motivated.
Okay.
Once you do that, you will know so much more. You're going to have that secret weapon to pull out when you need to drive performance, drive engagement, and communication. Millennials, I would say stop feeling like everybody pairs you with Gen Z, which a lot of people do. So I could also tell Gen X that millennials and Gen Z are different.
For
So
sure.
that's one for millennials. But two, you're going to be the leaders very soon. Gen X is set to retire even earlier than baby boomers, and we didn't even talk today about the institutional knowledge that leaves when with an aging workforce. But millennials are now it once Gen X leaves. So upskill yourself as best as you can. Get training in AI and train and learn how to prepare for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And then Gen Z, understand that experienced professionals are here for a reason. They got here because of their traditions, because of what they did, and they paid their dues. Respect that and be curious about that. Learn from that.
That's good.
And then for those coming out of college or high school, because a lot of Gen Z are bypassing college due to the current higher education system and the rise of skilled trades. So regardless of whether they're leaving high school or college, what I would say is say yes to as many things as you possibly can. I know a lot of people say be aware of your commitment, say no to things, but the reason I got to where I am is because I said yes to a lot. I looked at every email. If something was happening and I could make it, I was there. And it really helped me build my network. And your network is your most important asset, in my opinion.
Agreed. Agreed. And finally, person coming out of college, what advice would you get? Or was that the advice? Just
That
state
was the
yes.
advice I
That
would
was the
give.
advice.
Say
Okay.
yes to everything, like every networking event,
Okay. Got it.
if there's an opportunity to do something, whether it's for yourself or for somebody else, say yes. That's going to build your network, and having that network early on will come back to help you in the future.
I love that. We tell all of our people ABC, always be connecting, networking. I fully agree with that, Camber. Thank you so much for your time. You are a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for teaching me, for teaching all my listeners. It's a joy to have you on the show. I wish you the best of luck, and I love to stay connected as you pursue and grow your career.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thank you for joining us on The Leader's Edge. I hope today's conversation inspired you to lead with even greater purpose and impact. My big three takeaways from my conversation with Camber are these: generational curiosity. I loved that quote she said. I love curiosity anyway. It's what drives me. And the idea of generational curiosity makes a lot of sense to me. The other generations are not aliens from another planet. They're more like you than you know. So take the time to ask questions and get to know them. Practice generational curiosity. Number two, she talked about how flexibility is key. People may come to your company for the pay, but they will leave if there isn't the flexibility they need for a healthy work-life balance. Work-life balance or work-life integration means more to the younger generations than ever before. And number three, create places, workplaces of meaning. Purpose and meaning matter. So consistently share the why behind what you do. She talked about the fire alarm place. They don't just sell fire alarms, they save lives. Keep talking about that deep why. The younger generations are looking for careers that have purpose, meaning, and connection. Listen, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. I'd love a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more leaders like you, and that is the point of this. We want to raise leadership awareness and hone leadership skill. So stay connected with us on social media for behind the scenes content, leadership insights, and updates on future episodes. Don't forget to check us out at yourleadersedge.com and follow us at Leaders Edge Podcasts on all major platforms. So until next time, keep pushing boundaries, keep leading at the edge. I'm HR Huntsman. I'll see you soon.